But legal departments today, right, they're being asked to do so much more than they were just a few years back, right? They are not only a cost center that evaluates certain risks as they go, but they are being asked to be on the cutting edge of what the corporation, the rest of the company is doing in terms of penetrating markets and looking at new market legal environments, protecting both the product and the brand name out there proactively in the markets that they serve. They're looking at risks and liabilities for products and services. They are asked to help understand things like the very swiftly evolving privacy legislation, both in the United States and around the world. So they're asked to do a lot. They are bringing more and more work in-house. And yet, if you look at the landscape of the tools and platforms and software that they're using today, there's still considerable technology debt. And whether it's document management, contract management, collaboration, spend management, if you look at it across the board, the tools of the previous generation that were available just a few years back are no longer cutting it for these departments. I believe you would all agree that legal departments are very much underrepresented in the process of the corporation's yearly initiative, project, and technology roadmap. So they are not represented enough in that yearly cycle of budget allocation and planning for projects, technology evaluation, and implementation. And quite frankly, and I think a lot of you that have been on the other side in corporate operations, you would agree that the legal departments also remain a little bit of a black box to operational stakeholders and executives in terms of, well, what is it that they do? How do they do it exactly? What are the key processes and strategies that the legal department is asked to serve? And how can they really impact the bottom line in a positive way? So that is one of the biggest takeaways, I would say, from this slide. So let's talk a little bit about how do legal ops executives really get a full seat at the table in terms of road mapping, strategic planning, budget allocation, technology evaluation, and implementation. Well, if we take a page from the playbook of other departments that were maybe a few years back considered, other corporate functions that were considered more of internal cost centers than anything else, let's talk about the strides that HR and customer service, cost accounting, inventory management, quality control, how did they evolve over time, and how did they become, full-blown members at the table when it comes to planning and budgeting and implementing technologies, right? Where do they start? Well, a lot of it is dependent on a person or a group of people. Process and technology evangelism. And by this, I mean this in the most positive sense. Many of you who I recognize right now in the list of participants, many of you are evangelists in terms of looking at processes, looking at technologies, putting all these pieces of the puzzle together and serving as the connector between legal ops and the corporation. The funny thing about it is, rarely is there a formal evangelist job title, right? You can't also be simply anointed as an evangelist and thus it's, be it so. You probably don't even think about yourself as an evangelist. And you probably spend a lot of time going to webinars, reading about what other legal departments are doing out there in the market. What are the findings from the things that they have done? What are processes, tools, and systems available to other corporate functions? where you see a fit or some similarity to what problems you need to solve in the legal department. So the point here is if you're on this if you're on this webinar and you spend a lot of times in discussions like this, you probably are an evangelist. Let me click to the next one. So what does a legal ops evangelist look like? What do they do? Let's distill it down to a few areas of strategy, planning, goals, and metrics. You look inward. You look at your department and you say, how does the department need to support long-term corporate growth, products, markets, legislative landscapes? You are looking and you are distilling the pathway of your company, and you're saying, our department really needs to fit into that strategy, and it really needs to have processes and people in place to serve that long-term strategy. You're also looking inward and you're talking about planning within your department. What's the shape of the legal department? What are the legal competencies that you today are asked to serve, but also will have to serve in the future? What are the goals to serve your internal and external stakeholders, both operational executives within the company, but also the customers of your company? Looking outwards, what are the service levels that are needed for internal and external stakeholder satisfaction? How can we be easier to do business with as a legal department? And metrics. How do we measure ourselves? How do we measure if we are delivering the legal services to our internal and external stakeholders well? What processes do we need to track? What tools do we need to have to be able to say that we are doing a good job, we are predictably easy to do business with, and we serve our stakeholders in a way that is both timely, serves their needs, and is transparent? That is the inward-looking evangelist within legal ops. At the same time, you're constantly challenged to look outwards. What are the macro use cases? What broad legal operational functions are you looking to transform and automate? What are your peers at other companies doing? When you look at technologies, are you thinking more about platforms or niche solutions? Are the needs based on your strategy and the way you want to shape your legal department, do they call for large platforms that incorporate both, legal spend management, e-billing, or are you more in need of smaller niche solutions like document automation, perhaps drafting automation, contract review, collaboration platforms? These are things to take into consideration as well when you look outward. You look at technologies, now you're also faced with thinking about vendor feasibility. What's the financial viability of some of the software companies or technology providers that you're looking at? What is their support model? Do they have enough people to support the product in the way that you need that support to happen for your legal department? How many people do they have in the continental United States? What are their service levels for the technology if you, let's say, have a product issue or a support question? And then you probably should and are thinking a little bit about the total cost of ownership. So thinking like a CIO or a CFO in your own company, what's the ROI? What's the potential return on investment of these solutions? How many use cases will this technology that I'm thinking about, is it covering just one very focused use case, or is the use broader? Is it integratable with other tools and systems that we have? Thinking like a CIO, you're probably also going to ask yourself, what are the skills that I need to actually implement this within my organization for the legal department? What are the skills that I need long-term to be able to maintain this? Because the first implementation, you're probably never going to stop there. You're going to continuously evolve the solution. So you need to, in the long term, think about the skill set of the people that'll help you implement, evolve this over time. And then how does this platform or niche solution, how does it fit into the overall technology footprint of your entire company? You might be using ERP systems. You might be using different document management systems. What is the feasibility of integrating those to other systems that the overall corporation uses, both in, let's say, customer service, finance, accounting, supply chain, and things like that. So it's a very, very complex, looking inward and looking outward to find the fit of the use case, the technology, the feasibility, and then the long-term cost of ownership. Any comments or questions so far? And can you still hear me? Okay, excellent. Colin's saying yes, so I'm going to take him at his word. Now, as you're putting together the strategy and the shape of your legal department, I believe a lot of you have seen some really, really good thought leadership. You've probably seen this clock, 12 core competencies, the maturity model. I don't want to spend too much time talking about this because you could spend hours and days talking about the roadmap of maturing from certain functions that are foundational to advanced to mature within legal ops. What I would like to leave you with is there's great material available on Clock on this. I would advise you to take a look at that. I also want to say that Colin himself, Colin McCarthy, he's got great material about distilling legal ops functions into 6 key pillars of legal ops. And Colin was a little bit too modest to include that into this presentation, but I would highly advise you to reach out to Colin separately and take a look at how he has distilled this maturity model into 6 key pillars for legal operations. It's definitely worth a very, very deep read there. So now you've talked about your strategy, the shape of your department, your the maturity of the functions that you're supporting today and where they need to go. So now let's talk about putting together what the legal operations strategic roadmap looks like. Probably step number 1 is really educating the rest of the enterprise, the CFO, the CIO, the COO, the Chief Information Security Officer, and a lot of your executive and management stakeholders on this is the view of legal operation processes and inefficiencies that we have today. These are the identified technology gaps and areas where the existing technology tools and systems are just falling short for us to be able to support you the way that you and our department really envisions. These are the functional capabilities that are needed today and tomorrow and 3 years down the road to effectively support the rest of the enterprise. And this is our prioritized suggested timeline of projects and initiatives and technology implementations that we would like to undertake that fit into the strategic roadmap, all with one goal: serving your internal and external stakeholders in the way that is acceptable for them today and in a way that will be able to meet their needs tomorrow as well. So now when you have a roadmap, you have projects and initiatives and technology requests prioritized, how do you really get that full seat at the corporate budget planning table, right? Work with the CFO. Have well thought out investment justifications that also go beyond just pure cost avoidance. And cost avoidance is, oh, this is going to save our internal attorneys this much time. That is probably the focus of how these types of business cases were done years ago. Today, in highly projectized corporate environments, that's just not enough. Talk about and qualify, internal and external stakeholder satisfaction. How are we going to be easier to do business with? Quantify what kind of legal project management efficiencies your proposed roadmap is going to bring over time. Qualify how the identification of legal risks is going to be better, faster, and more efficient, and thus allow the corporation to move at the speed that they need to continue to grow in new markets with new products and new services. Work with the CIO. Help the CIO understand the operational impact of your proposed solutions and technologies to IT. How would this fit into the current technology landscape, right? Help the CIO understand the needs for implementation, both using external and internal resources. Help the CIO understand the long-term skills and resources needed to maintain and support. Once again, it's total cost of ownership. What does the CIO need to plan for to be able to maintain, uphold, mature, and improve these platforms and softwares that you're envisioning? And work with the CIO and other operational executive. Outline what are the operational improvements to their departments that they will see by the legal operations department being better, easier to work with more transparency. What are the service levels for things like contracts and vendor reviews and other aspects of the day-to-day legal support? What can they expect from you in terms of service level agreements? We will be able to review vendor risks within a certain amount of time. Great. That allows the COO that needs to work with these vendors to understand, okay, great, within a month or 2 months, I will know exactly if this vendor is acceptable from a risk standpoint, from a product liability standpoint. I know how to move forward with my initiatives as a COO. Talk to the CIO about improved transparency and accountability. Once again, your operational stakeholders, they need to move at the speed of business. You really need to give them insight and give them expectations and accountability with in what time can our department support your initiatives so that it doesn't slow down the business, so that there's predictability and accountability all across the board. So this was my 22-minute distillation of some of the things that we've all talked about at length. I hope this was a little bit insightful and gives you, a handful of things to think about, talk about. Colin will share these slides, and we're very, very happy to continue this conversation and maybe in the future drill into each one of these areas to really give you tools and steps on how to be part of the strategy planning and budget allocation process within your corporation.
All right, thanks very much, Alex. Very enlightening presentation. Just by way of introduction, I know that my audio is off when I did this. My name is Jack Stanovsek. I am a Director of Markets and Growth at NeoDologic, and I had originally come to the company in our customer success team. I just mentioned that because I have a very detailed and intimate knowledge of the platform and its capabilities. So by all means, if you have any questions about particular functionality or use cases, and as to whether the platform is able to handle them, please let me know, and I'm more than happy to advise you on that. But getting back to the presentation, the topic that we're presented with is making the case for new technology, and I'm talking specifically about how you can use a platform company to really leverage the most out of your technology. And the analogy I'm going to use for that is teaching law departments how to fish. I'll get back to this. I'll just give you a little bit of taste of that for now, but really hammering home Alex's points. It is critical that you have an internal champion to both look inward and outward to develop the project plans, to consult with the relevant stakeholders in order for your digital solutions to be a success. On the customer success team, we saw this all the time in that where you have someone that's really driving the innovation journey, putting their hand up, willing to go to bat for the technology, those are the clients that are going to be the most successful. So certainly that's a really important point that Alex makes, and it's something that we always want to have on the agenda when we talk to prospects. The other aspect he talked about was getting a seat at the table. So it's a bit of a paradox because automation makes work easier, but innovation is incredibly difficult. It is not an easy process. You have to consult with many different people that have many different viewpoints as to the place of technology in a business and the willingness to adopt new technologies. So just know that it is an uphill journey, but you're going to reap a lot of benefits once you go through the consultative process of onboarding new technology and then the maintenance of making sure that the new technology is a success at your company. That was really the point when Alex is talking about, talking to the CIO, the CTO, the COO. That provides assurances for the business, but also it can provide assurances for yourself. So not only are you, making a pretty good guess about how useful this technology is going to be to your firm, but going through the process of actually providing the documentation and mapping things out will provide assurances for yourself as well. It'll qualify your hypothesis. So Alex talked about getting a seat at the table. Chronologically, I think it's a really great point for me to come in because I'm going to be talking about how to keep your seat at the table once you onboard these new technologies. So getting back to my analogy, so I am going off the saying, teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a day. Give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. Teach a man to fish, he'll eat for a lifetime. I'm using that analogy in the context of law departments. So teach a law department to build digital products, etc. I'll get to the conclusion at the end of this presentation. To kind of bolster my a little bit of a clunky analogy, the topics for discussion today, how do you build digital products? So I'll use that in the context of our company at NoCode. You can think of that as the equipment. The types of digital products that you can build. So what are the fish that you're going to receive from the digital products that you're able to build for yourself? I'll show some use cases in action. So that's the fishing trip or the expedition. And then I'll talk a little bit about the derived benefits that you see from implementing these new technologies. And that's really the moral of the story to this presentation. So getting to the first example. So how to build digital products. So at NoCode, we are a no-code platform. And the no-code aspect is really the central piece of the platform. What do we mean by no coding? We mean that it is an intuitive, graphical, drag and drop interface that doesn't require any developing experience whatsoever for our users. It takes a little bit of training on how to use the platform itself, but there is no coding involved. So how we go about doing that is structuring the building process for your digital products around how an average person and not a software developer thinks. So an average person thinks in maybe a linear manner or a graphical view, and we try to tap into that at NoCode. I had a few examples provided, but because they are videos, they're being omitted from this presentation, but I will be able to show you some screen shares once we get into some of the demonstrations of the presentation. So your equipment is a no-code platform. So the no-code aspect is clear. The other aspect of that is the platform aspect. So not only are you able to build your own digital solutions, but you're able to do quite a wide array of use cases, as you'll see in some of my next slides. So it's not a point-based solution in the sense of you're getting something out of the box. It's really a build it yourself type of scenario. But what that means is that you can hyper customize your digital offerings on one platform, both in terms of functionality and in terms of design. Okay, so in terms of types of digital products, so these are the fish in the analogy. So the first kind of categorization I like to show is non-use case specific. And it's helpful to think about how a business will use digital solutions versus how firms will use digital solutions. So on the business side, we have the idea of automating low value but high volume work. So very non-complex matters that you have to churn through a lot of them, that's really ripe for automation and it's ripe for a digital offering. The other aspect that can coincide with the former is automating internal processes. So really mapping out the journey that a user will take going through your digital solutions from start to finish, and including all the different stakeholders and actors that might interact with the digital product along the way. For firms, it's a little bit different. So firms are obviously making most of their money and their bread and butter off of billable work. So obviously you're going to be wanting to automate non-billable work. For some firms, they have matter-based pricing models. Those are great for automation. You want to spend as little time on those as possible. So if you can get an application that produces a document that's 95% of the way there in terms of a draft, that's all for the better. Another interesting method is where firms will build out point-based solutions for clients' challenges. So what they mean by this is the firm will approach a client about automating a process that they might do manually. And they might do this for a number of reasons. One reason is just to display that they're a very good business partner in addition to being a very good legal counsel. But another reason is because, oftentimes clients are looking for digital solutions themselves. So by a firm approaching the client initially, they really take control of that innovation journey and in turn capture the client for future matters and references. And finally, we have creating standalone digital products to sell on the market. So the idea of not catering an application to a specific client, but really addressing a particular workflow or a particular function that can be purchased by many different clients on the market. So the other way that we can divvy up this categorization of types of digital products is by use case. So this is just an abbreviated list of use cases and some examples. So on the first line, we have contract negotiation and execution. So a classic example of this for in-house departments are NDAs. Also new supplier contracts, so onboarding new suppliers and having that negotiation process happen in an automated format is another example of a digital solution in the contract negotiation and execution stage. On the execution side of things, you have the ability to integrate with e-signing software like HelloSign and DocuSign. The next one is contract lifecycle management. So this really shines in the procurement automation space. So not only onboarding your contracts, but having a dashboard view of them where you're able to access key pieces of metadata, perhaps contact the contract owner on the external organization side, perhaps initiate some type of renewal of the document, be it via negotiation or by a standard replacement of the existing contract with different dates and perhaps different prices. Another aspect of this is vendor onboarding as well. So those two kind of coincide together. Third, we have practice management. So looking at your business more globally beyond the legal department, HR investigations are a great example of this, providing a very detailed and thought out questionnaire that's in a web format, form format. Is very useful because it captures information and structures it into a way that's really intelligible for the end user to receive some type of tailored report. Perhaps there's some type of flags on the HR investigation that might require the lawyer to actually discuss the incident with the relevant employee. Also, you have self-help apps, so something that's publicly available to anybody anybody at your business. They enter into the application and they are able to receive advice about their query without ever having to actually interact with a human being. Next, we have policy guidance. So this is the idea of taking handbooks or policies that might exist in paper format and really building a workflow of digital rules around them. And then finally, we have client self-service. So beyond the business itself, you can go outwards to your clients with automated FAQs and triaging. So the client comes into the application, they say they need a particular type of service. It goes beyond that by asking them some follow-up questions to really hone in on what they actually need the business to do. And then the relevant business member is contacted by way of email about what particular service they need to provide to the client. We also have examples of advanced document generation and risk assessment as well. So that is a bit of a rundown about the types of products. So some of the use cases, so this is our expedition that I was talking about that I'll go through. We have an in-house NDA solution. That's a really great example of automating an NDA process from start to finish. We have a contract lifecycle management application. This one's also very useful in thinking about collecting data and putting it into a very useful format that's right for analytics. And then if we have the time, we can get to the self-service termination letter generator. I know that we did start a little bit late, so I am a little bit wary on time, but we'll see if we can make that one as well. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And everyone should be able to see a workflow that is on the NoCode system. So it takes a little bit of orientation as to how the system kind of works to understand what's going on here. So the wider pool here are different organizations. So in this case, we have a company and we have an external party. The lanes within the pool are different actors within that organization. So here we have an internal business client, we have a junior counsel, and we have a senior counsel. Those lanes aren't just for diagrammatical purposes. You can also associate permissions with users' accounts. So if you assign someone to an internal business client group on NoCode, that person can only go into this lane's digital offerings. They can't go into the junior counsel or senior counsel lane. From there, it's a matter of following the breadcrumbs to understand what this workflow automation piece is doing. So we're starting off the workflow. The internal business client comes into an application. So this node right here is a series of web forms that are strung together. They input some information about the NDA that they need from legal. And then an email is sent to junior counsel with a link that brings them to their own application where they can view that NDA and generate, or view the request and generate the NDA that the internal business client has requested. So we're surfacing data from this application and this application for the junior counsel. When they're finished with their NDA generation, they can send it off to senior counsel who can then review it through their own application. Senior counsel has the choice to either say, this is good to go, it can be e-signed by the external party, or they can say, no, this actually needs some revision, junior counsel, here are my instructions for revision, I'm gonna port this back to you, and then you can do the revision. So we have this looping pattern here as well, which can be quite useful in terms of making sure that the document's obviously the one that you want, but also capturing some versions of the document and having that data at your fingertips as well. So I'm going to go ahead and run through this workflow. I can do that just by pressing the run button. So what's happened here, this is just taking me to a URL link. So I'm being taken into the internal NDA request application, and right now I'm the internal business client. So when I launch this application, I can list my company's name as the relevant company, and then you have this choice of NDAs. So on the back end, you have a library of templates that you can choose from. We just kept it to 2 for these demonstrations, just to make it really, really quick, because we don't have the time. So I'll say that we're onboarding a new employee. We can call her Anna Apple, and she's a director, and I will have to add my own email address added with plus employee just to make the demonstration actually work, or else I'm sending it to a blank email. So the application saying, is this the correct information? I'm going to say yes, and I'll enter in my email address again because I need to act as all the actors in this workflow. So when I click next, what's happened now is that I've completed this aspect of the workflow, and an email is being sent to the addresses that I specified as the law department, and I will come into this application as junior counsel. Oh. So there's that email there. I'm junior counsel now, and I'm going to come into the application, review the internal business client's request for an NDA. So it's a new employee one I know. and then I'm able to actually generate that NDA within the application itself. This is a little bit of an arbitrary classification of clauses. So obviously, a period of confidentiality clause is going to be required aspect for you to answer. You can either do ongoing or fixed. Many of these other, what we're calling our optional clauses, are things that would probably be stock standard in most NDAs. We just separate them out for the purpose of demonstrating functionality. So for example, if I want to add a severability clause, we can have this pro forma text that's populated in the document that's generated to show how this is being updated in real time. I'll say updated for legal operators. Other aspects, you can have clauses that have prefixed text. So perhaps senior counsel had drafted the template. They don't want junior counsel to touch any of the breach of agreement clause. So it's a take it or leave it type basis. When we click next, the document's going to be presented to junior counsel. And if we come down here, we can see that the text has been updated in terms of the severability clause. The breach of agreement clause has been included, but also we're surfacing information from that original application that the internal business client had entered, because we have the employee's name here of Anna Apple and the company name of Neotologic. So I'm going to say that this is ready to go, and this is going to be sent to senior counsel for review. So now in the workflow, email being sent to senior counsel, and then senior counsel comes into their own application. So we have that here. I have to review the NDA as senior counsel. I have that cap on. And now when the senior counsel comes in, they can see the same exact NDA that was presented to the the junior attorney. And how we know that, the severability clause is updated as per the text that I put in the previous application. So now there's an approval, workflow approval piece that's built in here. I either had to say that this is ready for signature, in which it gets sent out to that email address I entered in the first application, or I have to say no, actually there needs to be more revision to this. So here are my instructions to junior counsel. We are running out of time, so I'm going to say that this NDA is ready for signature. And when I press next, I will receive an email as the new employee that has to sign this new vendor NDA. So click here to sign that. And we have anchor tags that are automatically bound by DocuSign. And when I finish this, we'll be ported back into the workflow to complete the process. So the agreement's been signed, and it's also been sent by way of email to the attorneys and the internal business client. So I think that gives a good idea of what we're talking about when we're saying creating a digital solution using a no-code platform on your own. So hyper-customized, easy graphical drag and drop interface that directs your user journey from start to finish. Also on the back end, it's saving a lot of the data. So we have the in-house NDA solution here. If we look at the most recently started session, as we went along the session, it was saving all of the data that I was entering. So for example, the final document is right there. So unfortunately, I think we don't have time to go over the other two use cases, but by all means, if you would like to see them in action, reach out to myself. I'm more than happy to run through some demos and talk about your business needs. But coming back into the presentation, we can talk about some of the derived benefits just very quickly, because I think that's the most important part. So the first aspects of these benefits are really tangible. So first of all, you're able to push unstructured data into a structured format, which allows legal departments to start speaking with data. And that's really important when you're talking to the C-suite, because the C-suite really cares about data and they care about numbers. They don't particularly care about intuition. So just having the ability to speak with your data is a very useful takeaway and benefit. The other aspect, of course, cuts cost. So you're not going to have to spend as much time on each NDA that needs to be generated, which frees up your team to work on more complex matters and cut cost on outside counsel. You also can ensure accuracy and consistency in the results that you actually provide, both to internal business clients and to external clients. And then on the intangible side of things, It keeps your team satisfied. So your team is not going to be spending as much time on their NDAs. They're going to be working on more fulfilling, challenging work. And when you're coming from a law firm to in-house, you're typically a very smart person. You don't want to spend all your time doing a really mundane task that has a high churn rate. So it's keeping your team satisfied. Working with a platform instead of multiple point-based solutions, it's reducing administrative headache and staff fatigue. On the administrative headache side, you only have to liaise with one contact at the company, that's the platform, to discuss all of your use cases. On the staff side, you have a similar UX for all your employees to enter into, so there's not the fatigue of having to learn a new system anytime that you want to address a new particular piece of functionality or introduce it into your group. And then finally, it fosters a culture of innovation within the firm. So that signals it to your staff, it signals it to your clients and to the market more generally that your company is a innovative one. And sorry, Colin, so last aspect that I'll show. So to kind of tie off the analysis, so teach a legal department to build digital solutions, and they'll shed some light on the black box that is the legal department, because they'll be able to provide some data and insight that they've captured using their digital solutions. And in turn, they can keep their spot at the table, because they can say, with a little bit more authority and with a little bit more evidence in hand, how these digital solutions are improving their processes and saving the company money ultimately. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jack. That was wonderful presentation and demonstration as well. And you too, Alex. We've received some questions that came through the chat and the private chat. One of these from Frank Marvin was, he wanted to know, how does NoCode compare with software development solutions?
Yep, the main distinguishing feature is that you're taking the power of software development and you're putting it into the hands of subject matter experts. So typically when you have software development, what occurs is you'll have a subject matter expert that's providing instructions to the developer, and the developer then goes ahead and implements those instructions. What often happens is that some of the nuances that the subject matter expertise might take for granted are not communicated to the software developer, and the actual product that's built doesn't necessarily hit the mark, and you have to go through an iterative process of rebuilding. By collapsing the two roles into one, that eliminates the possibility of that occurring, firstly. Secondly, it's much cheaper. NoCode is a little bit faster as well, because you have the tools that are ready to go. You don't need to set up your code yourself. It's very easy. And then more importantly, particularly within the legal space, you can edit and maintain your digital solutions and make sure that they comply with the law yourself, instead of having to go back to that software developer to implement the changes and make sure that your digital product is in compliance with the law. Perfect.
Just switching gears, Ryan Kennedy wants to know, who's building the digital products on NoCode?
On low code or no code?
On NoCode or low code, right? Whichever.
Yeah, so typically, I mean, it can be a number of different arrangements within firms. It's usually going to be a knowledge management or a practice innovation team. So someone will take control of the actual building process, and they'll receive instructions from the subject matter expert. Oftentimes, we do have subject matter experts that become quite involved in the building process. And sometimes, if it's a really sophisticated matter, or if the firm might not have resources, they'll retain Neotologic's solutions architects on a professional services arrangement to build out the solutions themselves. Within corporates, usually it's legal operations teams. Sometimes it can be some type of innovation team. Anyone that's looking at the business from an operational standpoint are usually the ones that are susceptible to actually building out the solutions.
So talking about building out the solutions, how long does it take to do that? Is
the
it
one
needle in a haystack kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how complex the use case is going to be, right? But it also depends on how organized you are prior to actually getting into the system and starting to build. So the ones that are really successful are ones where the client has thought through the requirements on paper, has written them out, has negotiated them with key stakeholders and involved them in that process in a consultative way. And then once that's all settled, they start building. And from there, it's really quite quick. It doesn't take long to build things on Neota logic. The ones that tend to grind gears and take a very long amount of time is when people get really excited seeing the new tech. They start building right away. The tech doesn't hit the parameters quite, and then you have to go through a process of breaking things down and building it up again.
We have a comment from my good friend Scott Pickup up there in Canada. He says lawyers need to build. Couldn't agree more with you.
Yeah, Scott was my client before I left. I was the firm's CEO, CSM, not CEO, before I left to come to the sales team. So hi, Scott. I miss you.
Another question came in. What factors should a legal department consider in adopting a no-code platform versus a point solution? You kind of went over it, but if you want to elaborate.
Yeah, I think so first of all, what you want to consider business need, I think, is the first thing. So is the point-based solution able to address your key business needs? If so, then maybe doing a platform solution doesn't really make sense. If you have something that's out of the box, ready to go, why not just go for it? If there are certain pieces of critical functionality that an out-of-the-box solution cannot offer, but a platform can, that's when you have to start thinking about, okay, do I have the resources to learn this platform, to dedicate people to actually maintaining it, to manage the contract with the vendor, et cetera, et cetera. So those would be the key parameters, I think.
So it sounds like if I'm in a hot seat in a legal operations role and I'm building out, the first thing I'm looking for is low-hanging fruit, solve the NDA. You run through that process. Then you're seeing more kind of complex things like GDPR, some of the compliance things we have to deal with. It sounds like if I can imagine it, and if it fits into the what if then now logic, you can create it, right? You can automate it. You can have an automated approach and a manual approach, right? You can kind of have a hybrid kind of view in it. With that said, what are some of the other use cases, besides the NDA and the contract workflows that Neota solves? And maybe Alex, you can speak to this as well, from the consultant perspective. Like what are some of the things that companies are really kind of thinking about right now?
Well, an interesting use case that we encountered just recently is really propagating expert knowledge within a law department or a law firm by saying it was really best practices for motion writing, specifically around motions for attorney fees. Believe it or not, upon request, a younger associate or attorney can really say, well, I have these parameters. These were the facts of the case. And you can use Neota to really serve up from documents and other systems what are the key points and authorities that you should use for this specific motion. So it's really, I would say, not just expert knowledge, but it's expert knowledge and the usage of your legal department's accumulated best practices that you have seen to be successful in any pleading writing, to show attorneys, this is what you should use, this is what you should say, these are the precedents that you should quote. So that was a recent really interesting use case.
So two questions fall on that, Jack. Does Neota have the ability for integrations and maybe to pull integration of different systems, aggregate that data, and then create a workflow around that?
Yeah, so we can integrate with anything with the REST API, and essentially any vendor that's on the market that's serious is going to have some type of API to integrate with other systems. For example, Salesforce can't do everything. They have to rely on different vendors and kind of stitch together with those vendors. So yeah, anything with the REST API, we can pull data in, we can post data to. And some examples of that, we've done Salesforce, DocuSign's a very common one, Box, all of Google's API suite, iManage, et cetera, et cetera. I think SharePoint as well.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So looks like we're almost at the top of the hour. Just want to tell folks, really appreciate your time and attention. Sorry for the late start today. I will be we'll be following up with the recording. And Jack and Alex, I want to give you guys the last word. If you want to have folks reach out to you if they have any questions.
Yeah, absolutely. Any questions whatsoever, even if you just want to chat about the legal tech industry. I'm a bit of a geek for these things. So by all means, reach out to me. My email's there. Hopefully you'll be able to receive it in the follow-up email that Colin sends. So please don't be strangers. I'm happy to tee up any meeting that you like.
Same here. I'm very happy to reach out. Please use the email that's in the presentation. We love talking about these subjects, and yeah, the point of us all being here is to constantly share knowledge. So very happy to do so.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'll be following up soon. Thank you.
You're a great
Thanks,
host,
Colin, for
Colin. Thank you
organizing.
very much.
Thank you very much, guys.
Thank you.